The world is watching Bitcoin. The world is obsessed with gold. But behind the curtain, the US government just signed an order that changed the status of silver forever. November 14th, 2025, the United States Geological Survey, the USGS, published an updated list, a list that most people will never read. But this list has the power to reshape global markets, trigger resource wars, and decide which nations survive the next decade. On that list, buried among 50 other minerals, is silver, officially designated as a critical mineral for national security. What does that mean? It means America now treats silver the same way they treated oil in the 1970s, as a strategic weapon, as a matter of life and death, as something worth going to war over. This isn't about jewelry. This isn't about coins. This is about missiles that can't fly without silver, solar panels that can't work without silver, AI chips that can't process without silver, electric vehicles that can't run without silver, and now the US government is quietly hoarding it. While you were distracted by stock markets and crypto crashes, they were securing the one metal that makes the modern world possible. And once they control the supply, they control everything. Let me explain why silver just became the new oil. And I mean that literally. In the 1970s, oil controlled the world. Whoever controlled oil controlled transportation, controlled manufacturing, controlled military power. The oil crisis of 1973 proved that when OPEC restricted supply, entire economies collapsed within weeks. Gas lines, rationing, chaos. Silver in 2026 is what oil was in 1973. Let me show you why. Oil made the 20th century possible. It powered cars, planes, factories. But silver makes the 21st century possible. It powers solar panels, electric vehicles, 5G networks, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and military defense systems. Here's the difference. When oil was scarce, we found alternatives. We developed electric vehicles. We invested in solar and wind. We adapted. But when silver becomes scarce, there is no alternative. There's no substitute that matches silver's electrical conductivity, thermal conductivity, and reflectivity. Let me give you specifics. Every solar panel requires 20 grams of silver. The world installed 400 million panels in 2024. That's 8,000 tons of silver consumed in just 1 year by just one industry. And solar panel production is growing at 25% annually. Every electric vehicle uses 30 to 50 grams of silver for electrical contacts, circuit boards, and charging systems. Global EV production in 2025, 18 million vehicles. That's 900 tons of silver, and EV production is projected to hit 35 million units by 2028. Every 5G cell tower uses 3 kilograms of silver for high-frequency signal transmission. There are 12 million 5G towers planned globally by 2030. That's 36,000 tons of silver. Every AI data center being built by Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they're all silver intensive. High-performance processors need silver for thermal management and high-frequency connections. Add it all up, industrial demand for silver is over 650 million ounces per year. That's 20,200 tons, and it's growing exponentially. But here's the nightmare. Global silver mine production in 2025 was only 820 million ounces, and it's been flat or declining for 5 years. So we're consuming almost 80% of all newly mined silver just for industrial uses, and demand is exploding while supply is stagnant. That's why silver is the new oil. Because when it runs out, the modern world stops. Solar stops, EVs stop, 5G stops, AI stops, defense systems stop, and the US government just realized this. That's why they're hoarding. So what exactly happened on November 14th, 2025? Let me walk you through the order that changed everything. The U.S. Geological Survey, under authority from the Department of Interior and Department of Defense, published the 2025 Critical Minerals List. This list identifies minerals that are essential to U.S. economic and national security, and where the U.S. has significant import dependence or supply chain vulnerability. Silver was added to this list for the first time in modern history, and once something is on that list, the rules change completely. Here's what critical mineral designation means legally. First, the federal government can invoke the Defense Production Act to compel private companies to prioritize government contracts for silver. Second, they can restrict exports if domestic supply is threatened. Third, they can seize private stockpiles in a declared national emergency under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. That last point is crucial. If the government declares a silver emergency, they can legally confiscate private silver reserves, just like FDR confiscated gold in 1933 through Executive Order 6102. Now here's why they did this. America imports over 70% of the silver it consumes. The largest sources are Mexico, Peru, and Chile. But here's the problem. China has been aggressively investing in Latin American mining operations for the past decade. In 2024, Chinese companies owned or had majority stakes in 40% of Peru's silver production and 35% of Mexico's through Belt and Road. Initiative investments, China has secured long-term supply contracts that give them preferential access to Latin American silver. So America realized we don't control our own silver supply, our adversaries do. And that's terrifying when you understand what silver is used for militarily. Patriot missile systems use silver cadmium batteries. Tomahawk cruise missiles have silver zinc batteries. F-35 fighter jets use silver in their avionics and electrical systems. Satellite communications rely on silver-coated components. Radar systems need silver for conductivity. Without silver, the US military goes dark. That's not an exaggeration. That's a documented vulnerability in Department of Defense supply chain assessments published in March 2024. So the government made a strategic decision. Start hoarding now before it's too late. The U.S. Strategic Silver Reserve Program began quietly in late 2025. The target? Accumulate 100 million ounces, about 300 tons by 2028. When the government starts hoarding, physical silver disappears from markets. Dealers run dry, premiums explode, and prices go vertical. Let me show you what's happening to silver prices right now in January 2026, and why 90 per ounce is just the beginning. On January 1st, 2024, silver was trading at $24 per ounce. On January 1st, 2025, it was $33. Today, January 15th, 2026, silver is trading at $91 per ounce on the spot market. That's a 279% increase in 2 years. Let that sink in. No other major asset class has moved like this. Not gold, not Bitcoin, not stocks. Silver has outperformed everything. But here's what's more important than the price. Look at what's happening in the physical market. Dealers are quoting delivery times of 8 to 12 weeks for large orders. Physical premiums, the amount you pay above spot price for actual metal, have exploded from $3 per ounce to $18 to $22 per ounce. Some products are simply unavailable. American Silver Eagles, the most popular silver coin in the world, are on back order at every major dealer. The U.S. Mint announced in December 2025 that they are rationing Silver Eagle production due to planche supply constraints. This is a supply crisis in real time, and it's mathematical. Let me show you the numbers that prove this isn't sustainable. For the past 5 years, the world has been in a structural silver deficit. That means annual demand exceeds annual mine production. In 2024, the deficit was 140 million ounces. In 2025, it widened to 180 million ounces. Where did that extra demand come from? Solar panel manufacturing, EV production, government hoarding, investment demand from people who finally understand what's coming. But here's the critical point. When you run a deficit, you have to draw from above-ground stockpiles to make up the difference. COMEX silver inventories have dropped from 370 million ounces in 2021 to 245 million ounces in January 2026. That's a 34% decline. London Metal Exchange inventories have dropped 28% in the same period. Shanghai inventories are down 52%. The global inventory buffer is evaporating. And once inventories hit critically low levels, when there's no cushion left, prices don't rise gradually. They spike violently. We saw this in 2011 when silver hit $49 in a matter of weeks. But 2011 was mostly investment speculation. This time, it's industrial panic combined with government hoarding combined with actual physical shortage. Analysts at Bank of America published a report in December 2025 projecting silver could hit $150 to $200 per ounce by late 2026 if the supply-demand imbalance continues. Goldman Sachs raised their 12-month target to $110. But those are conservative estimates based on historical volatility. If we get a genuine supply shock, if one more major producer restricts exports, if industrial users panic and start hoarding inventory, we could see 300 plus per ounce. And at that point, silver won't just be expensive, it will be unobtainable. Now, let me show you the geopolitical dimension that's driving all of this, because this isn't just about markets, this is about survival. On January 1st, 2026, the People's Republic of China implemented new export restrictions on refined silver and silver-containing materials. The official reason cited was national resource security and strategic reserve management. Here's what that actually means. China produced 3,600 tons of refined silver in 2024. But they're also the world's largest importer of silver ore and concentrate, processing material from countries like Australia, Mexico, and Peru. When you include their refining operations, China controls approximately 15% to 18% of globally traded refined silver. And as of January 1st, 2026, that silver is no longer available to Western buyers unless they get special export licenses. And those licenses are being denied to American companies. This is economic warfare through resource restriction, and it's devastatingly effective. Let me explain the defense implications. The U.S. military's Aegis combat system used on destroyers and cruisers relies on silver zinc batteries for backup power. These batteries can't use alternatives because they need high power density and compact space. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program uses silver-plated components throughout the aircraft. Over 400 pounds of silver per plane in wiring, connectors, and bearings. The U.S. currently has 450 F-35s in service with plans for 2,400 total. That's 960,000 pounds of silver needed just for the F-35 program. And that's assuming no losses, no replacements, no maintenance. In September 2025, a classified Department of Defense report was leaked to the Washington Post. The report warned that critical supply chain dependencies on adversary-controlled resources pose immediate operational readiness threats. Silver was specifically named. The nightmare scenario for Pentagon planners. A Taiwan conflict begins. China immediately bans all silver exports to the U.S. and its allies. Within 90 days, U.S. weapons production slows. Within 6 months, it stops. Not because we don't have the factories, not because we don't have the workers, because we don't have the silver. That's why silver is now on the critical minerals list. That's why the Defense Production Act can now be invoked. That's why Section 232, the national security trade provision, can now be applied to silver imports and exports. And here's the part that should terrify private silver holders. Section 232 gives the president authority to adjust imports and to take such other actions as deemed necessary to protect national security. That's legal language for. We can confiscate private reserves if we declare an emergency. It happened with gold in 1933. Executive Order 6102, signed by President Franklin Roosevelt, required all citizens to surrender gold coins, bullion, and certificates to the Federal Reserve in exchange for $20.67 per ounce. Failure to comply was punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Could it happen with silver? Legally, yes. Politically, maybe. Practically, if the supply crisis gets bad enough, absolutely. So what do you actually do with this information? How do you position yourself when silver becomes a national security asset? Let me give you 3 critical distinctions. Physical silver versus paper silver. Silver versus gold. And timing. First, physical versus paper. There's a huge difference between owning physical silver bars and coins versus owning paper claims on silver, like ETFs or futures contracts. When you own physical silver, you own an asset. When you own paper silver, you own a promise that someone else will deliver silver to you if you ask for it. But here's the problem. Most paper silver is fractionally backed. The SLV ETF, the largest silver ETF in the world, holds approximately 450 million ounces of physical silver. But there are thousands of shareholders who could theoretically demand delivery. And here's the bigger problem. If the government declares a national emergency and invokes the Defense Production Act, they can requisition silver from ETF vaults. Your paper claim becomes worthless, but physical silver in your possession is much harder to confiscate. Recommendation: if you're buying silver as protection against supply crisis or government seizure, only buy physical. Store it privately, not in a bank vault. Second, silver versus gold. A lot of people are buying gold because it's the traditional safe haven, and gold is important. But silver has something gold doesn't have: industrial demand. Gold's primary use is monetary, about 50% for investment and central bank reserves. Jewelry is another 40%. Industrial use is only 10%. So if the financial system stabilizes, gold demand can drop quickly. But silver's industrial demand is permanent and growing. Solar panels don't stop needing silver if the economy recovers. EV production doesn't slow because inflation cools. 5G infrastructure doesn't disappear. Military uses don't go away. And because industrial demand is 75% of total silver demand, the price floor for silver is much higher than for gold. Gold could drop 50% if investment sentiment shifts. Silver might drop 20%, but then stabilize because industrial users will buy any dip. Plus, silver is more volatile. Higher risk, higher reward. Gold moved from $800 to $2,100 in 2024, a 16% gain. Silver moved from $24 to $91 in 2 years, 279%. If you believe the supply crisis is real, silver gives you much more upside. Third, timing. The worst time to buy is after everyone realizes what's happening. The best time was 2 years ago. The second best time is now. But let me be honest about the risks. Silver at $91 is expensive historically. It could pull back to $70 or $60 if industrial demand temporarily softens or if a recession reduces manufacturing activity. However, the structural deficit remains. Government hoarding continues. Chinese export restrictions are in place. The inventory drawdown accelerates. Every dip gets bought by industrial users who can't afford to run out of supply. So what's the strategy? If you have no silver exposure, start building a position. Don't go all in at $91, average in. Buy 20% of your target position now. If it drops to $75, buy another 20%. If it spikes to $110, buy the remaining on any pullback. But don't wait for $30 silver. That's not coming back. Those days are over. Let me close with a historical parallel that should make this crystal clear. In 1971, President Nixon removed the dollar from the gold standard. The official reason was inflation and trade deficits. But the real reason was that foreign countries, led by France, were draining U.S. gold reserves by exchanging dollars for gold. America didn't have enough gold to back all the dollars in circulation. So Nixon closed the gold window, made it illegal for foreign governments to redeem dollars for gold, and gold went from $35 per ounce to over $800 by 1980. A 2,200% increase. History is repeating with silver, not the exact same way, but the same pattern. A critical resource becomes scarce. The government realizes they don't control the supply. They declare it a national security issue. They start hoarding. They restrict private ownership if necessary. And prices explode. Silver is no longer just jewelry. It's no longer just an investment hedge. In 2026, silver is the new oil. It's the resource that determines whether nations can build solar grids, manufacture electric vehicles, deploy 5G networks, produce AI chips, and maintain military superiority. And when something becomes that critical, governments don't ask nicely. They take, they restrict, they hoard, they weaponize. The U.S. government adding silver to the critical minerals list on November 14th, 2025 wasn't a formality. It was a declaration. A declaration that silver is now a matter of national survival. And once something becomes a matter of national survival, regular market rules don't apply anymore. Supply and demand still matter, but they're overridden by strategic priorities. Private ownership becomes subject to government control. So here's my final question for you. Do you own physical silver? Or are you holding paper assets, ETFs, mining stocks, futures contracts? Because when the supply crisis hits its peak, when governments start requisitioning supplies, when export bans proliferate, when industrial users panic, paper promises won't protect you. Only physical metal will. Comment below, how much of your portfolio is in physical silver? Are you positioned for the supply shock? Or are you hoping this all blows over? Share this video with anyone who thinks silver is just a shiny metal for coins. Because in 2026, silver is power, and whoever controls the silver controls the future. Subscribe if you want to know which other critical minerals are next on the government's hoarding list, because silver is just the beginning. The resource wars have started, and most people don't even know the war is happening. The government is hoarding. The question is, are you?